A Twitter beef ignites when a sizzling pitcher gets hounded by a spoil sport who gets clapped back by a superstar gymnast. She's an athlete and a soldier, and she's speaking out on trans bans against being both.
Because the second we stop trying to fight for our right to defend our country, and we cave into things like this, then the American dream is lost.
Transposition Sports, we're on target and running for daylight.
Okay, get in. Huddle up. I, slot right, sprint right, jam, zig, Karleigh's clipboard. I, slot right, split right, jam, zig, Karleigh's clipboard. It's on one. Ready, break. Yeah, it's a Karleigh's clipboard edition of Transposition Sports. Hello again, everybody. This is Transposition Sports. I'm Karleigh Webb, and caught me on the practice field right now. Reason? Hey, we got a big game this week. The always tough Maine Mayhem come to town. That means my good friend Allie Cleveland. I'm sure we're going to run into each other a couple times this week. And also, it's our military appreciation game. And you need to check out these jerseys we're going to be wearing. It's kind of cool. Black, gold, camo, very Black Knights of the Hudson. It's really giving West Point here. And a special thank you to the Connecticut Army National Guard for letting us use the jerseys. I'm looking forward to wearing them. Also, this game has a special meaning in part for me because of the voice you heard at the end of the introduction. Later in Transposition Sports, we're going to be hearing from Major Corocoran. She's a U.S. Army officer. She's trans. She's awesome. She's an incredible ultra-marathoner. And she got a little nasty last season in the WNFC. She was a WNFC All-League selection as an offensive lineman and a linebacker. She's going to talk about this ban and what it means to her. More on that to come a little bit later on. But right at the top this week, of course, the Twitter beef of Twitter beefs. In one corner, of course, Riley Gaines doing what Riley Gaines does, picking on high school kids, because after all, she's a part of
Karens against women's sports, because we don't really care about women's sports. We're here for the transphobia.
Well, Gaines was at it again last week when she trained her sights on a kid named Marissa Rothenberger. Now, Rothenberger is a pitcher at Champlain High School in Minnesota, or rather, Champlain Park, I should say. Class 4A champions in softball, partially on the strength of Rothenberger pitching 3 straight games and being dominating, while she also got timely hits, clutch hits, got help from her offense. They win a state championship. And of course, Riley Gaines, being Riley Gaines, calls her a boy. Demeans this kid. Now, here's the thing about this. We don't know if Rothenberger is trans or not. That's something that came from the people that are all out, that are always doxing kids, putting them online. You know the icons, women, Karens against women, sports types. They do what they do. But there's been a lot of people who've also written on social media that this kid, it may not be trans. There are some people said she's intersex. Some people said she's just a very tall cis girl. It doesn't matter. The point is, you don't pick on kids. And Simone Biles, gymnastics legend, multi-time Olympic champion, probably the greatest gymnast to ever do a vault or a floor exercise or anything else, and a lot of people concur with that opinion, basically said it was gross of Gaines to do this. She got fed up and said, "You're picking on a kid." Now, of course, you know what happens. At one level, there were some people who went after her because she supposedly said, "Oh, you support men and women's sports. How'd you like it?" One person even went as far as said, "What if Larry Nassar said he was a woman?" Now, that was foul. I'm going to say that. The person who wrote that, knowing what Simone Biles has been through as far as being sexually assaulted by a team doctor, a member of the U.S. women's gymnastics team, I can tell you right now, you're going to hell for that. I'll just call it there right now. And of course, there were the people who believe what transphobes always believe, that transgender women aren't women, cisgender women suck at sports, who consistently said one of the greatest American athletes to ever represent this country, the Olympics, a world championship, or anything else in her sport, had the nerve to fix their mouth and say, well, if you had to go against men, you would lose. Well, I know quite a few male gymnasts who said, we don't want that smoke. It's Simone Biles. We don't want that smoke. Just so you know, just saying. Simone was right in that. You don't pick on a kid. I don't care how you feel about this issue, you don't pick on kids. But that's something that especially these last few weeks, we've seen a lot of. We saw it with AP Hernandez. And we saw that with Veronica Garcia. In fact, remember, what happened to Veronica Garcia for the second straight year after she won a state championship? Roll the tape.
In a time of 55.70 from East Valley of Spokane, Veronica Garcia.
And in response, Veronica had this to say, and yes, we got video of this now, courtesy of Dystat.
Put this in the most PG-13 way. I'm just going to say it's a damn shame. They don't have anything else better to do. I hope they get a life, but oh no. It just shows who they are as people.
That's right, you heard it. She said it. And Veronica, by the way, if you're watching this, I'd like to interview you. I want to do a sit down with you. Anytime you want to call on Transposition Sports, our door's open, the couch is open, make yourself at home. But this is what these people have done over and over again. People like Riley Gaines have done it. In response, Biles also said, why don't you pick on someone your own size? Had she stopped there, I don't think anybody would have a beef with that except for the right-wing anti-trans squad and the Karens Against Women's Sports. But she took it one step farther and engaged in a little bit of gray area transphobia. Okay, not a little bit. To me, that struck me as tone-deaf and in poor taste, that she went after Gaines in that way. Now, that's what led to the second tweet a couple of days ago, where Biles basically apologized. And you know what? I have no problem with that apology. If she's apologizing strictly for that, who would beef about that? But there was more to it. And this is where I think that you give some deductions to Biles' score, because she did bobble a couple dismounts. One was when she said maybe there should be a separate category for trans athletes. Now, I understand in the heat of the moment, she was probably spitballing an idea. If nothing else, this is where the next step of allyship could come for Biles, to understand that, no, that's not a good idea. Yeah, and I know that there are people who say, for example, the California Compromise. My colleague at Outsports, Sid Ziegler, comes to mind, who said that this was a good idea. Sid, I disagree with you. A lot of other people disagree with you, and I disagree with anyone who says that that compromise was a good idea. And I disagree out of hand with the whole idea of separate but equal. Because the fact is, as we've seen conclusively with trans issues across the spectrum, especially in these last 5 years, separate never leads to equal. You know it, I knew it, we all know it. But for Simone, I can give her a pass for that, at least in that moment. I can give her a pass and at least encourage her, talk to some trans people about this issue. Simone, you ever want to talk to me about it? Lines are always open. But the apology tweet, I have a fundamental problem with this. If it was just about the apology itself for getting a little personal with Riley, now at one level, that's just being classy, and I'm all for being classy. But on the other side of that, how much class does Riley Gaines and those like her really deserve? Because let's really think about it. Let's talk about the original premise here. They went after kids. These are the type of people that go after affirming parents and even go as far as accost them while they're watching their kid at a track meet, i.e. like that Sonia Jha individual out in California does. Even the well-meaning people like, actually I don't think he's well-meaning. He's a political opportunist, but Gavin Newsom allowing a high school kid to be name-dropped by a known anti-trans actor on his podcast. And I'll never forgive him for that, for letting Charlie Kirk use A.B. Hernandez as his own personal piñata without any pushback. But I look at people like Riley Gaines and I'm wondering, how much grace are they owed? And to me, they're owed none. I can respect Simone for wanting to apologize for making a personal comment and taking a personal shot at games. But I wouldn't be too upset if she didn't apologize for it. Some people are trying to spin it as she's saying, I think, quote unquote, men and women's sports, or using their parlance and using their terminology, which she kind of does in her apology, is wrong as well. If she's apologizing for that, then that's where myself and Ms. Biles will have to part company. Because to me, the fact of the matter is, the whole concept that it seems that a lot of people are latching on, the concepts of fair competition and fair, we have to balance inclusion and fair competition. First off, I have a question for anyone who feels the need to put that word fairness in. Number one, what about the current situation is unfair? Where's the unfairness? You're going to have to describe it to me because, quite frankly, scoreboards aren't finding it. The fact is, the scoreboard is not finding it in many ways. We're talking about small numbers, but also we're talking about limited results. That's one thing. You see, one thing that I truly believe is that when a cis person says fairness, what they really mean is fair is defined as the comfort of cis people. They're really meaning comfort. I've said this over and over again. Some of you are not comfortable with A.B. Hernandez winning it. So you know what they did? They decided, okay, let's make a way so that A.B. Hernandez is the winner, but she's not. That's what this compromise was. There's also the microaggression involved in it. Remember, A.B. Hernandez won the triple jump and had to share the gold medal with a cis girl. Now, that didn't happen in the long jump because a cis girl had a better performance than A.B., but A.B. is the only trans girl there. So theoretically, if that logic is right for A.B. to have to share a gold medal, shouldn't the winner of the long jump have to share the gold medal with her instead of A.B. Hernandez getting a silver and having to share that with a person that she jumped farther than who really finished third? One thing I will say, Sid Ziegler and I talked about this, and Sid was like, everyone gets a medal. That's fine. I know one person who, if it was one of his athletes who got that medal and who got the same medal as AB got and didn't jump as far, he would be the first person to say, no, you give that medal back. Either give my kid the bronze medal that they earned or don't give them a medal at all. That would have been my dad. My dad wouldn't have trusted that. In a related note, A.B. Hernandez, who won the triple jump, tied in the high jump with two other competitors, overall had a great first state meet, even with the controversy, gave an extensive interview this week on what she's been through in the season she's had.
It's definitely crazy. I mean, I get a lot of hate comments, but I'm I don't care. 16-year-old girl with a mad attitude, you think I'm gonna care? The support was just intense. I mean, I wasn't expecting any of it, to be honest. I was expecting to just go out there and compete alone. They really made my experience perfect. Did what I wanted to do. I PR'd and everything, so that's really what I was aiming to do. So all this backlash, I'm just I performed my best, so that's all I cared about.
And thinking about this, my mind harkens to what Parker Malloy wrote on her Substack this week as well. The simple idea that trans people, to a lot of these people making these policies, aren't real. So they have no rights by which they're bound to respect. And that's also what's driving the train here. A.B. Hernandez has another year to compete. She'll be a senior next year, so she'll be back jumping, hopefully jumping well. If nothing else, I hope that a university in Canada takes a good look at her and says, hey, if you want to keep competing, come up there, because U Sport and the CCAA have not put on the ridiculous bans that the NAIA and the NCAA have. Canada didn't Charlie Baker itself, and that's not a bad thing. Personally, I wouldn't mind seeing A.B. Hernandez jumping for the University of British Columbia or Western Ontario or wherever. This is a kid who has earned the opportunity, especially, to continue competing and to win. When we return to Transposition Sports, we have a sit down with U.S. Army Major, ultra marathoner, and semi-pro football demon, Corocoran, to talk about the band, sports, and where the fight goes next. I'm Karleigh Webb. This is Transposition Sports, a special Karleigh's Clipboard edition. Stay with us.
I interrupt Transposition Sports because I'm cute and I can. And for this message from the angry gay grandpa. You don't pay me enough for this, Karleigh.
So maybe I'll start a little bit softer.
This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine.
Dad?
Before you say anything, I just want to apologize for what I said this morning. I've been doing a lot of thinking. If you want to change your name, if you want to wear a dress.
It's a skirt, Dad.
Skirt. I don't know the kind of support you need, but let's get you some for all this transgender stuff.
Wait. Are you serious? Dad, what is this?
Oh, this is me supporting you. This is me saying I love you. This is me not losing you.
Love you, Dad.
Love you. Holly.
This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine.
Yes. Not bad for a 54-year-old arm, huh? Welcome back to Transposition Sports. I'm Karleigh Webb, and yes, Karleigh's Clipboard edition, live from the practice field. And this week, we got a really special interview for you, because there's this woman I know named Corocoran. If you look at her Instagram, first thing you notice, she hits that gym hard. And there's a reason why, because she's an active athletic sort, especially on the football field. Player coach for the Denver Bandits of the Women's National Football Conference. Was all-league selection on offense and defense. And I've seen her play some defense. I'll tell you, if you run the ball against her, you may want to rethink your life choices. And if she's not playing football, she's doing ultra marathons, adventure races, endurance events, anything to push herself and test herself. And watching her do what she does motivates you. Motivated me to get back in the gym, I'll tell you that. But motivation and leadership, that's her main job. See, her official title is Major Corocoran, United States Army. 17 years in, a decorated soldier, numerous commendations, 2 tours in Afghanistan, has led troops into harm's way, has been shot up for the country we all love. And now, because a certain Secretary of Defense feels that being a transgender American is quote-unquote incompatible with military service and dishonorable, she's being separated. I think about her and 15,000 other estimated transgender Americans who are being separated due to this ridiculous policy. We're grateful that earlier this week, Major Corcoran sat down with us to tell her story of life, sports, the battle that's ended, and the war to come.
Now, recently, you're a graduate.
I mean, I just graduated from another master's program the School for Advanced Military Studies here, and which helps you become operational artist and a practitioner of military operations. And it's a advanced strategic studies degree, and it was a phenomenal course. I am grateful for having the opportunity and the growth to be able to go through it.
And even with all that, there's that one little fly in the ointment. But you turned it around. Here is how you did turn that around. Here's how you did that. Now I want to know one question. What made you decide to take a very difficult thing and turn it into a flex?
I mean,
you turned this into
a
flex.
People go and they say, hey, we're not going to allow you to do this unless you go in male regs. And you sit there and you're like, wow, that's cool. What a great narrative that is, like forcing us into male regs. Like, doesn't even matter, because at the end of the day, I'm still going to be able to do my job no matter what.
In fact, there you are.
I'm still going to, you can force me to shave my head, but you're not going to erase my femininity. You're not going to erase who I am. I'm still a trans woman, and I still will live my life as what I have gone through. And yeah, I'm going to flip this script on you and, throw it back in your face and say, no, you may tell me that if I want to walk across the stage, I have to cut my hair. And that didn't come on my chain of commands here. That didn't come from them. So I'll leave it at that. And so, I don't think they understand who we are. I don't think well, first off, they don't, otherwise they wouldn't be doing this to us. But at the same time, I don't think you understand who I am and the character that I have and the strength and resilience that I've built over time. If you're going to try to purposely intimidate me and take something away from me that I have merit for, oh, you did. You pushed the wrong button. And yeah, I will 100% say bet and cut my hair, and I will still show up and do the job. Now, was it stressful? Is it traumatic to lop off all of my hair? Absolutely. My hair was down past my shoulders. I miss it. I miss being able to braid my hair. But you know what? Like, for the principle, to maintain my character, to maintain my integrity, and be able to get what I want, and be able to get what I deserve, I'll do it. Sure. But don't say it's because I'm conforming. I'm not. I'm showing you that it doesn't matter what you do. We are still here.
What has it meant for you to serve the nation and move forward in your transition?
Yeah. You can tell by a big flag behind me. I am the vice president for Sparta Pride, which is a nonprofit organization that supports and advocates for transgender service members. And right now, there is a mass purge of transgender service members out of the military. And being outspoken, there's no way of me hiding it. And it's difficult. I've been doing it. I've been serving for 17 years. Before that, I was on an RTC scholarship for 4 years. And so I've been living this lifestyle for 21 years, and now I'm 39 years old. And just imagine anybody coming out of a career, you'd be kind of worried about that. You're worried about finances. I'm still likely not going to be able to get a pension. And so there's a lot of unknowns. But if it wasn't for things like sports, I would have never had the resiliency, both physically, mentally, emotionally, to be able to deal with this hardship ahead. If it wasn't for things like sports.
I just heard you say, won't get a pension.
Yeah.
Now, to a person outside looking in, this makes no sense. 2 tours in Afghanistan. You've led troops. You've been shot at, and you're not getting a pension. And also, you've heard some of the things that the Secretary of Defense has said about trans troops. When you hear all that, do you ever get the feeling in the back of your mind, why am I going to engage in a fight to serve a nation that seemingly doesn't want to serve me?
Because the second we stop trying to fight for our right to defend our country and we cave into things like this, then the American dream is lost. The ideals of freedom and liberty are gone. So I've been I have grown up with a sense of patriotism, a sense of honor and character from my upbringing as a young kid, to reinforcing that, reinstilling that. And I don't just wear the Ranger tab, I bear it, in which you never quit, you never surrender, you never leave any of your fallen comrades behind. You continue to display the intestinal fortitude that's required to complete the mission. And I'm not going to stand by, and we're not going to stand by and let people strip freedoms that we have fought for through our honorable service, that we've been open about for over a decade.
There's some of the things you've heard from the civilian leadership. What has been the most insulting thing about this ban to you?
Oh, I think the thing is most insulting is to say that we lack courage and honor because we're serving in a birth sex other than the one we were assigned at birth. And it's so funny because you do not understand the amount of courage it takes to come out as a transgender service member, be transgender in the world today, play sports as a transgender athlete. The amount of courage that it takes for any of these people to do that is well far beyond that it takes to just raise your right hand to serve your country. That's my honest opinion, because I know for me and my own personal experience is that was scarier and took more courage to live as my authentic self, which would be the honorable thing to do. So I always find it very, very interesting that the verbiage was used towards us is that we lack courage and honor, when those are the two principles that probably explain who we are more than anything.
I'll admit, for me, that bothered me hearing that.
It should, but
that bothered me here. That bothered me hearing that because of my people, because of people that who are in the service, and people who have served. One thing I hear a lot is, you trans troops are a readiness issue. You've led troops. In what way does that phrase not hold water?
All right, so you want to talk about readiness, right? Let's break down readiness. Okay? So you want to talk about deployability? We can do that first. We're deployable. Period. Next question. If you wind up getting a surgery for your shoulder, right? You're going to be non-deployable for, if I have a grade 3 AC joint separation right here. It's pretty gnarly.
Ouch.
If I had gotten a surgery on that, right? That was going to be 6 months non-deployability on profile, tons of physical therapy and all that stuff. But I grit and bared it and used grit and was smart in my rehab with it. And it took years for it to function. But if you go on my medical profile, you'll never see me on profile for it. Why? Because the injury occurred 1 month before I was supposed to rotate as a battalion S3XO over to Korea, right? the surgery that I got, I timed right after Thanksgiving when everything slows down before holiday block leave.
Right.
That's when I did it. Between exercises, during time when there's nothing going on, where it was going to work out, recovery, come out of it at the 6-week mark. I was told, hey, you can go back to PTing and do whatever you need to do. And those are the surgeries where people go, oh, you're not employable for an entire year. It's a lie. And it's very frustrating to hear that as something that's being told all the time. We're saying, oh, they're not employable. Yet when the policy came out, we had service members about to embark on missions on ships in the Pacific. We had service members in undisclosed locations in CENTCOM. We had people who just got back from deployment out there as well. We had people serving all over the globe. Yet you're going to sit there and say we're not deployable. It's wild. And the other thing, the medical side of things, right? The cost that it takes to remove us from service far outweighs the cost that it takes to maintain us. And we're talking something along the lines of 50-fold.
Now talk about that cost. Now, one thing, talk about that cost, because a lot of people just as the idea is like, we hand you your discharge papers and that's it. It costs the amount to print out the discharge papers. What doesn't the civilian know about what's about to happen to get rid of 15,000 people?
For me, I was supposed to move and go to another duty station where I was going to be a planner along with a couple of other planners. We've now taken me out of the equation, and you've now taken that work and thrown it on the shoulders of other people who have families. And now you've taken away time, talent, and energy from an organization that you cannot backfill. And therefore, and even if you do the next man up, that has a trickle-down effect of time, resources, and money it takes to train these people. And so when you remove somebody, say, that's 15 years in the military, you're talking about a multi-million-dollar investment. Think about just a cyber warrior. The amount of money that it costs to train somebody to protect our elections, to fight against, our adversaries who are trying to influence or infiltrate our government. That is an egregious amount of money that you now have removed from service. And it costs the taxpayers tons and tons of money. So then, now that you're going and pushing them through the separation process, you're also costing taxpayers $1 just to remove them from service. So say it costs $500 million worth of money to separate all service members out there. Now, if you're going to do the money there, and then you factor in how much does it cost for our medical care a year, you're potentially removing qualified service members who are deployable. And you're potentially you're doing that, the cost to allow us to get medical care, times that by 100. So the cost that you've taken to remove us from service could have paid for our medical care for 100 years. And then you want to talk about one other factor? The military is still spending like close to 10 times as much on Cialis or Viagra for men than they do for transgender medical care. We still provide testosterone for people who have low testosterone in deployed combat environments. Same thing for estrogen for women that are out there as well. Hormone replacement therapy is not just people for who have gender dysphoria or had previously suffered from gender dysphoria. I don't suffer from gender dysphoria. I don't. I solved that problem when I transitioned. And then you forced me to cut my hair.
We're
to
getting
be
to
a male
that.
rank.
We're getting to that.
Yeah.
But so within that readiness issue, the whole if we send you to say Saudi Arabia, we can't keep your testosterone and estrogen cool. We've heard that one.
Yeah. So, like, for instance, that I know people who deploy with that anyway, right? Small vial, everything's fine. Me, I am on pills, so they could never use that excuse against me anyway. So, I mean, the argument of, frontline troops, like what's going to happen and all this other stuff. And you sit there and I go back to 2010 when I was a combat outpost where I didn't shower for 3 months and I rotated out of there twice, 3 months each time on the Afghan-Pakistan border. Well, I get 3 months of supply of pills that's like tiny as hell that fits anywhere, and that's 90 days supply. That's my refill. So people forget, even during World War II, we rotate units out of the front lines. And they also forget that we resupply classes of supply. And it's as simple as the doc within your platoon going, so-and-so needs this medication. And then that medication gets pulled from a pharmacy, and on the next resupply on a helicopter or some other means, it gets dropped off with all the other supplies. Why? Because we're the best fighting force in the world. Period.
Now, there's also the M word, morale.
Oh,
Major Corcoran, by having you as you are, would change the unit. It would affect the morale. We've heard this before. I know history has shown.
Back in October, prior to October, as I was going through school, we never talked about me and who I was and what I was going through. And then we had to after November, because it was like, hey guys, I'm going to get kicked out. And I don't know what that's going to look like, but we're going to fight against it. And we're going to try to maintain our service and what's there. And that's the problem, is like when I was in a tank battalion executive officer, I did my job and I was with the other service members, and it was not a discussion. No one cared. Could you do your job? That's all that mattered. Yeah, when I first showed up, just like when the first women showed up in combat arms in a tank battalion, some dudes were just kind of like, whoa. I remember one of my very first days, I was a career light infantry officer, and I showed up in tank battalion. I'm in the motor pool looking at a tank, and I'm going, what is that? Well, that's the power pack. You got the engine, you got the turbine, the transmission, like it all comes together in a power pack, and they're pulling out of the back of the tank to do maintenance on it. And I just go up to a staff sergeant and I go, hey, Sergeant, and you could tell he was visibly shaking because one, the battalion XO is talking to you. That's scary. 2, female infantry officer. 3, transgender servicemen. They were scared to talk to me. And I was like, hey, man, have you ever met anybody like me before? And he was just like, no. And I go, hey, dude, it's fine. I'm just a regular human being. I just want to know, what can you tell me about this tank? And he was like, yeah, ma'am, yeah. So, and he started explaining the engine and different parts of it and all this stuff. And after that interaction, didn't matter, didn't care. And that's what people they don't understand. And we've heard the same rhetoric over and over and over again. Oh, I can't be in the same foxhole as an African-American man. I can't be in the same foxhole with a woman because I may not be able to control myself. That sounds like a you problem. Oh, I don't want to be next in foxhole wondering whether or not the guy next to me is gay. No, that was never an issue. No one cared. And then, oh, I don't want to know if the person next to me is gender confused. And you're like, really? Do you think if I'm in a foxhole, that's the thing we're worried about right now? No. I'm worried about survival. I'm worried about watching your back, and can you watch my back? Period.
What was your experience like playing women's semi-pro football?
Well, I'll be honest. In a previous life, I always wanted to coach football. I was always like, oh man, I'd love to have, kids growing up. It'd be great to have a boy and teach him to play football like my father did to me when I was in high school and Pop Warner. That was like always a dream, right? And then when I lost my family and I transitioned, I was like, nope, never going to be able to do football thing ever again. And it was actually when I was early in my transition that a player from Dallas, Texas Elite, and their spouse at the time actually came from Kansas City, and they were both from Kansas City. They were like, hey, you should check out, women's, football. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Women's tackle football? That doesn't exist. And they're like, yeah. And then they're like, we're standing up a new league. It's the Women's National Football Conference. And I was like, well, this is cool. But yeah, no, I really don't have time for that right now. And like, I got brand new kids and all this stuff. And I was just like, it was one of those things where you earmarked and you're like, oh, that's interesting. Fast forward a couple years later, and I had started an Instagram account to kind of follow my journey, and I get a message, and it was from the owner of La Muerte de las Cruces, or Las Cruces de la Muerte, excuse me, and in New Mexico, and I was stationed in El Paso at Fort Bliss. And you're like, hey, see you lifting weights, are you, do you, have you ever played football before? I'm the owner of this team in the Women's National Football Conference. And I was like, I've heard of this league before. It's been years. But, I sat down with him. I talked to the coach and the owner, and I was like, hey, all this sounds great, but, I've got this going on. And then we pulled up the regulations, and you need to have been on hormones for 4 years. And so I sat back and I was like, hey, I can't play, but, I'd love to coach. And so when I coached that year, I then halfway through the season did a rotation to Korea. And then when I was on my way back, they're like, hey, coach, the team from Las Cruces, it's dissolved, and a bunch of us are up here in Denver. We could use you on the, O-line. And I was just like, all right, bet, let's do it. And so when I came back, I actually had to fight my way and earn my spot. So I did a bunch of special team stuff, and it wasn't until the playoffs that I actually started on the offensive line. And a lot of people looked at that last season that I played where I was a fullback and I was a defensive end, and they're all like, oh, there's a bunch of tackles and she's getting touchdowns and stuff. Like, I didn't realize my first couple years in the league, I was an offensive lineman. So I would love to roll that clip of making good blocks or pancakes like that. People forget that the trenches is where it's all at. And so I did that. And then moving into my last season, I told the coaches, I have a surgery coming up. And then when I get done, we'll see if I can play. But if I play, I would rather, play a different position. And that's when I wound up playing. And I came into women's tackle football because I was recruited into it. And then I played in women's tackle football because my teammates that I coached wanted me to be part of the team. And then I stayed because of my teammates that I played with, because honestly, it's the closest thing you can be in the trenches of warfare is being in the trenches with your sisters playing football.
What's your thoughts on some of the things you've seen? Some of the things have happened in the landscape. When you started playing ball, Leah Thomas happened. More recently, you've got people booing high school kids.
The rhetoric is just absurd. And honestly, if you were to look at the grander scheme of things, and you and I have talked about this before, right? Like if you make it like, hey, you can take estrogen and show up tomorrow and never have gone through anything through, you haven't done anything, right? And you've barely gone through the process. Your body hasn't even transformed, but now all of a sudden the next day or a year later, you're showing up and you're doing it at a competitive league. Now, if I'm playing, local kickball league, who cares? But if I'm like playing professional women's sports or on an
Right.
NCAA or something like that, then yeah, there needs to be thought put into it. But if you just cut off and say no sports for kids, no sports for anybody, you're missing the point of sports to begin with. And that's to be able to grow, learn leadership skills, teamwork, all these things while you still get physically better. If you eliminate that from kids or just a demographic of kids, you're disenfranchising them for a generation.
One thing for yourself, you not only play a team sport, you do, like we said earlier, you're going to do like a 50K, 50 miler. You do some. What got you into the ultra life? What got you into that? Because, I mean, I want to do an ultra at least once, just to say I've done it. But you do one, and then you're already saying, what's the next one I can enter?
Yeah, my old college roommate was here 6 years ago. We met up, and we met up to watch watch out, everybody. I grew up 10 miles from Gillette Stadium, so we were watching the Patriots play with Tom Brady. Okay, like I grew up there. It's the way it's going to be. All right, our high school rival was Foxborough, and so we watched a football game, and I met up with him and his spouse, and he was like, "Hey, do you want to go on a run?" And I was like, "Yeah, let's do it. Let's go on a run." And we went on like this 5 mile run, which I was back then. It was like 5 miles. Like, this is insane. And I was sucking wind, but we were talking about all this stuff. Well, what I didn't realize, this is us like trying to relearn each other from being college roommates and me having transition. And he was just like, we got done with the run and we were catching up, and he's like, "Hey, so run again tomorrow?" And what I didn't realize was like, he was a mountain climber, and he did all sorts of alpine sports. Well, we're in Kansas. There's no alpine sports. So he was getting himself into like trail running so he could move across terrain and still keep up with fitness. And what I didn't realize was he was coercing me into, the next thing I knew, I'm signing up for the Kansas City Marathon. And then we're signing up for ultra marathons. And when COVID hit, after that, the gyms were closed. There was nothing else to do except for run. And that's when I actually did a fundraiser for COVID, and ran 50K here around Post and raised like $800 doing it. And then I realized how miserable that was, but also it challenged me. And so the next year I did some ultras, and then I just wound up continuing to do ultra marathons all the way throughout, and except for my rotation to Korea. And yeah, it's just one of those things now, or becomes habits. Like, hey, it's summertime, I gotta start looking for races. And I just love the challenge of having to go through it. Last year, and I ran a trail marathon, ran the Kansas City Marathon, and then I did a 50 miler 6 days later after the Kansas City Marathon. But you want to look at, use that for grit. Heck, one of my friends, she's a lieutenant colonel and a CrossFitter, and she was just like, you know what? 2 days before the 50 miler, she's like, I'll run that with you. And so we wind up doing a 50 miler, and that was her first ultra marathon, and she just went out and crushed it because she's a phenomenal athlete. Game respects game,
What's the next step? What's the next step in this battle to stay in the uniform you've earned?
Well, unfortunately, that battle's kind of lost. The war's not over, but the battle is lost. We had an injunction for a little bit of time, and we fought against that. And everybody thinks Supreme Court already ruled on it. They did not. They stayed the injunction. So now we're going to be continue to fight it. The appeals courts for both the injunctions that are there are still going on. They still have the same stance, that is discrimination. But when it goes through that process, the Supreme Court won't see it probably until next year or later, right? The problem is with the current policy, we'll all be purged from military service before the Supreme Court even looks at it. So the war's not over. And even if the Supreme Court sides at the time against it and uses some old policies to say that this is why they can still do it, with disregarding the fact that it's just straight up discrimination, we'll have the ability to continue to still fight it afterwards. This is just one advocacy group. There's dozens of advocacy groups that are all coming together and working together to fight against this. And, I hate the excuse that the pendulum will swing back and, it'll right itself up now, like in the long run. I'm kind of tired of that excuse. Like solidifying it into law and allowing us to serve, solidifying things into law, like, hey, you can continue to play women's sports, or we still haven't even talked about trans men in the military. We still haven't even talked about trans men in sports. Like that, where's the uproar about that? There isn't. And that's why it's discrimination. And so you sit back and you go, this is all ridiculous. And maybe at some point there'll be some legal protections. And we just let people serve their country because they love it. And we let people play sports because they love it. And it's good not only for those people, but also for the human race to have people who understand leadership and teamwork. But, whether it's military service or sports or just anything, realize that our job as human beings out there is to continually grow and continuing to learn throughout our entire existence that we're here on this earth, so that we can become better human beings. And if there's anything, right, serving your country is a selfless way to continue to try to make the world a better place. That's one aspect. The other aspect that we talk about is sports. Sports is crucial for kids, for anybody, to learn teamwork, to infuse not only the mental aspect, but also the physical, social, spiritual, and emotional aspects of life. So whatever you do, learn about it and continue to understand that, if we're doing the transgender thing, look, me being transgender is just one aspect of who I am. Corocoran is far more than that. And you should get to learn to know us and continue to grow just like anyone else.
This is just the same discrimination warmed over and over again. Almost 80 years ago, they were saying the same thing about black troops. They've said the same thing about cisgender gay and lesbian troops. They've said the same thing about women in combat. Whatever group is not pale and male, they say this about. And time again, history has shown that performance wins out over prejudice, or at least we'd like to think so. What's happening here is the same thing that's happening with the whole sports issue, and by extension, the whole issue with citizenship as a whole. This is just another version of what I call Dred Scott 2.0. Some people want to say who is American and who is not. I find that very, very laughable in the case of Corocoran, because I can think of no one who is perhaps more American than she is, and those like her. At the same time, this all goes back to what we talked about at the top of the show as well. The idea that people who are claiming allyship in this moment are also trying to make that allyship conditional. They're also saying the thing, they're also trying to kind of hedge and say, well, I'm for this, but no. In this Pride Month and every day after, that won't do. It won't do for the kids that are being booed. It won't do for Major Corcoran and her comrades in arms. And it won't do for me either. Something to think about as we head through Pride and as we head to a week after Pride ends. A week after Pride ends, this nation celebrates its independence. With that in mind, I just want to leave you with this. Transgender Americans are Americans. For Transposition Sports, I'm Karleigh Webb.